The Titanic is currently resting at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, a precise location we have known for decades. We have sent cameras, advanced submarines, and even tourists down to witness this legendary shipwreck. So the most obvious question remains, why has no one simply brought the ultimate prize back up to the surface? Imagine turning the most famous ship in human history into a museum, charging admission, and making an absolute fortune. Over the past century, brilliant engineers, wealthy billionaires, and ambitious salvage companies have proposed dozens of recovery plans. Some of these ideas were highly creative, while others bordered on absolute scientific insanity. Yet, every single one of these grand proposals has failed miserably before even beginning. The primary reason begins with the sheer depth, as the Titanic rests roughly 12,500 feet below the North Atlantic waves. That is an astonishing 2.5 miles pointing straight down into the pitch-black abyss. If you took the Empire State Building and stacked it on top of itself 8 times, it still would not reach the ocean floor. At this immense depth, the crushing water pressure reaches a staggering 6,000 pounds per square inch. This is approximately 400 times the normal atmospheric pressure you feel while standing comfortably on a beach. Under these extreme conditions, human lungs would be crushed instantly, and a standard submarine hull would crumple like an empty soda can. In June of 2023, the world witnessed exactly what this terrifying pressure can do to a vessel. The Titan Submersible suffered a catastrophic implosion, collapsing its carbon fiber hull in a mere fraction of a second. The immense force instantly destroyed the vessel, scattering its shattered fragments across the silent ocean floor. This perfectly illustrates what 6,000 pounds of pressure does to a modern, purpose-built deep-sea craft. Now, try to imagine manually attaching heavy steel cables and rigging massive lifting equipment in those brutal conditions. You are working in complete freezing darkness, 2.5 miles away from the nearest breath of fresh air. But for the sake of argument, let us assume you somehow miraculously solve the crushing pressure problem. You manage to construct invulnerable equipment capable of operating flawlessly at the very bottom of the ocean. You immediately face an entirely new physical impossibility, which is the sheer, unimaginable weight of the wreck. The Titanic originally displaced over 52,000 tons of water, equivalent to the weight of 36,000 cars. There is absolutely no crane currently existing on planet Earth that possesses the power to lift that much mass. No mechanical cable system ever engineered could possibly handle that tremendous kinetic load from such an extreme depth. The required tensile strength simply does not exist in any synthetic or natural material we currently manufacture at that scale. Even if you could theoretically generate enough upward lifting force, the great ship would betray you the moment you pulled. Most people do not realize that the Titanic is no longer resting down there in one pristine, solid piece. The majestic ocean liner violently ripped in half during its terrifying descent to the ocean floor. Today, the massive bow and the ruined stern are separated by about 2,000 feet of desolate underwater terrain. Photographs reveal that the bow section still looks surprisingly intact, maintaining its iconic and haunting profile. However, the stern section is barely recognizable, reduced to a twisted, compressed pile of mangled industrial steel. Even the seemingly solid bow is actually incredibly fragile, fundamentally weakened by over a century of harsh saltwater corrosion. Entire sections of heavy steel railing have already collapsed, and the wooden decks are continuously buckling inward. If you boldly attached giant cables to the hull and started pulling, the ship would not majestically rise. Instead, the fragile metallic skeleton would instantly disintegrate into thousands of useless, rusty flakes. Since lifting it as one massive piece defies the laws of physics, dreamers have proposed some truly wild alternatives. One famously bizarre proposal involved filling the entire sunken wreck with millions upon millions of ordinary ping-pong balls. The optimistic theory suggested that these tiny air-filled spheres would create enough sudden buoyancy to float the massive ship. It sounds like a clever scientific trick on paper, but physics dictates a much harsher reality. At 6,000 pounds per square inch, every single ping-pong ball would be instantly crushed flat before even entering the hull. Another highly ambitious plan proposed injecting the massive wreck with thousands of tons of viscous petroleum jelly. Someone else mathematically suggested encasing the entire shattered ship in a gigantic, buoyant block of solid ice. Professional engineers calculated that this freezing operation would require pumping 500,000 tons of liquid nitrogen to the seafloor. Needless to say, transporting that much liquid nitrogen across the turbulent ocean is completely impractical. Then came the thrilling cinematic idea from a popular 1976 novel involving massive compressed air tanks. The fictional heroes patched the gaping holes, pumped in compressed air, and rocketed the ship to the surface. It made for a phenomenal movie poster, but it was written when the world mistakenly believed the ship was still intact. Even if the hull were miraculously whole, injecting compressed air at that extreme depth would rupture the steel instantly. Every single one of these grandiose ideas is fundamentally doomed by the strict, unforgiving laws of fluid dynamics. Despite these massive failures, one dedicated team did actually manage to bring a tiny piece of the ship home. In 1994, explorers located a massive 15-ton section of the outer hull lying abandoned in the debris field. They dubbed this impressive structural fragment the Big Piece and ambitiously planned to raise it to the surface. The initial 1996 attempt involved attaching heavy diesel-filled flotation bags to the fragile steel section. As the massive fragment slowly approached the surface, a sudden, violent hurricane unexpectedly hit the recovery site. The furious weather mercilessly snapped the heavy lifting lines, sending the 15-ton artifact plummeting back to the dark bottom. 2 years later, armed with significantly better equipment and immense patience, the recovery team finally succeeded. That single piece required 4 agonizing years, 2 massive multi-million-dollar expeditions, and unbelievable luck. Raising 15 tons was an absolute nightmare, making the prospect of lifting 52,000 tons statistically impossible. Meanwhile, as humans continuously debate salvage rights, a silent, microscopic predator is quietly eating the Titanic alive. If you closely examine recent underwater footage, you will notice strange, reddish-brown formations hanging off the damaged hull. Scientists appropriately call these fragile, hollow structures rusticles, because they look exactly like giant icicles made of pure rust. These rusticles are actively created by massive colonies of deep-sea bacteria that relentlessly feed on the ship's exposed iron. They aggressively latch onto the raw steel, consume its metallic essence, and leave behind these incredibly fragile hollow tubes. When a submarine's robotic arm gently touches one, it immediately crumbles into a fine cloud of rusty dust. And when that dust helplessly falls away, it permanently takes a tiny piece of the mighty Titanic with it. In 2010, brilliant researchers from Dalhousie University made a truly remarkable biological discovery inside those crumbling formations. Living securely inside those rusticles was a completely unique species of bacteria that had never been found anywhere else. They officially named this microscopic creature Halomonas Titanicae, the salt-loving bacteria born of the Titanic. This ravenous organism is biologically adapted to aggressively consume the specific type of steel used to build the ship. It creates thousands of tiny mounds of corrosion that slowly eat deeper and deeper into the thick hull plates. Scientists grimly estimate that the legendary Titanic is losing hundreds of pounds of structural iron every single day. The once impenetrable hull is getting dangerously thinner, and crucial internal support beams are severely weakening under the strain. Entire sections of the upper deck have already tragically collapsed into the dark, cavernous interior of the ship. Prominent features that were clearly visible in the original 1985 photographs are now buried under unrecognizable rubble. At the current accelerated rate of decay, some researchers believe the Titanic could completely disappear within 20 years. Others generously give it a century, but the ultimate tragic outcome remains exactly the same. The ship is slowly disappearing into the ocean, and there is absolutely nothing human engineering can do to stop it. And honestly, a large majority of historians and descendants believe that is exactly how it should finally be. Because beyond all the massive engineering impossibilities and the microscopic biological decay, there is another profound reason. It is a deeply emotional reason that has absolutely nothing to do with advanced technology, hungry bacteria, or billionaire money. The Titanic is a sacred mass grave site. More than 1,500 innocent people tragically died when the Titanic sank into the freezing water. Most of those terrified passengers violently went down with the massive ship, and their bodies were never recovered. When explorer Robert Ballard first discovered the wreck, his immediate reaction was not one of victorious celebration. After a few brief moments of overwhelming excitement, the grim reality of the disaster violently hit him and his crew. Standing solemnly over the watery graves of so many souls, they held a powerful moment of absolute silence. Over a long century in the deep ocean, cold water and marine organisms have consumed the human remains entirely. But scattered across the vast debris field, marking the exact spots where innocent passengers fell, are pairs of leather shoes. Sitting completely undisturbed on the silent ocean sediment, you can clearly see a mother's shoes resting next to her daughter's. In 2012, exactly 1 century after the tragic sinking, the United Nations officially declared the wreck a protected site. The wreck is now legally and morally treated with the exact same solemn respect as a traditional terrestrial cemetery. We ultimately haven't raised the Titanic because we simply can't, as the physics in the ocean forbid it. But more importantly, we haven't raised it because we morally shouldn't disturb the eternal peace of the lost souls. The ocean is slowly taking the great ship back piece by piece, day by day, until nothing remains. For the souls who perished that cold April night, slowly dissolving into the deep is the most fitting end possible.